Hey, what's up, Streettea fam? This is part one for the race card, which is part of the series for language of racism. I just wanted to, because this is a video blog, I try to give y'all the information. Some of you may not have time to actually read the content, or you're following and you want to know what it's all about, or want to have a way to share it. And I thought that it was a good thing to have the video blog included as well. The language of racism actually came about because of a lot of the recent events that was going on. I wanted to write about something that, would reach the masses, and also people could understand and they could relate to it. It actually birthed Streettea, the platform, if you will. This was one of my first endeavors as far as sharing my information with, people other than that were not family members and friends. A lot of people know that I wrote, but they didn't, have never seen any of the things that I wrote about. So the race card was the first installment of the series, The Language of Racism, which is basically exploring how history, has shaped the way as the conversation, a lot of things that are going on in the world today, and how it's affecting us and how we're dealing with it as a society, especially the Black community, African American community, if you will. When I first started to do Streettea, the Language of Racism, the paper, I was thinking a lot about how I wanted to refer to a lot of different things and the type of verbiage that I wanted to be using, because I didn't want it to be a situation where, there was confusion or, causing arguments. So one of the things I did was, as my reader, as my audience, I made it clear that we were going to be referring to white people as Euro-Americans. For the purpose of revisiting history, we have to take a look at this the way it would have been looked at, through the lens it would have been looked at that moment of time. What was the things that were going on? How were people being viewed? What was the things that were being said? And then apply that to how they're being said and, how it affects us today in society. And for that purpose, that's the reason why the paper, refers to white people as Euro-Americans, because they were the colonists. Of course, slaves, African American. Then we have all other immigrants that began to become a part of the United States through Chinese American, Mexican Americans. And of course, we can never forget about the Native Americans who were here first. And the paper actually addresses and breaks down how, we have to, for the sake of history and for history to be written properly, refer to them as Native Americans, because they were here first and this was their homeland. There should, in my opinion, never be any argument about that, because that is history, that is known, it is a fact, it is what it is. Now, in the race card, the reason why I chose to make this such a short read was because I felt like we needed to set a standard here. We needed to set a standard because I've had so many conversations with people. Of course, I like to call them the voices of dissent, saying things like, oh, well, it's, racism doesn't exist. I don't know what you mean. Black people are just using the race card. That's how it's referred to. That's the language of racism. And it's pretty standard. It's pretty standard at this point. When a person was, speak about systematic racism, racial profiling, things of that nature, and, there's no racism here. And it's amazing to me that the things that have happened in our history, the things that continue to happen every day and are in our headlines, and even if you open your window or you read the news, you're going to hear some conversation, you're going to get some verbiage, you're going to read some articles, you're going to turn on your TV, you're going to see some news about, systematic racism, injustice, it's everywhere. So it's kind of like you're saying there's no racism just because you can say there is no racism, which in fact, you can do that. That doesn't make it true. But I think we're definitely at the point where denial is no longer an option. You cannot say there is no racism. You have to choose, whether or not you're going to decide that is something that is actually despicable, and you and your family, you and yours will not be a part of it. Or, you can't hide in the bushes anymore and be like, well, I don't feel like I do that. Or I didn't have any slaves, so why should I have to worry about whether or not there's racism? Why should I have to have a conversation about racism. I didn't have any slaves. So many times I've been having conversations, about things that have happened historically, and I've spoken to white people, and they're saying things like, "Oh, well, what is white privilege? I've had to struggle all my life. I don't even know what that is. I'm struggling with my bills too." So let's be clear: white privilege does not mean that you have money. Does not mean that you are rich or powerful or making money moves. It simply means that by being white, it's like you're being right. You're right for the job. You're right for the home loan. You're right for the car loan. Even if you're out doing something that looks suspicious, you must be right because you're white. If a black person did that, they would not have the same response. And I don't understand why it takes anyone over the age of 4-year-old to understand this. A child can be taught how to use the bathroom. A child can be taught to understand, don't just cross the street without watching for cars. But it seems like Americans cannot learn that racism is wrong. And I'm not sure what it's going to take in order for that to happen. When you look at the protests and the things that are happening outside, and you say to yourself, well, I want them to stop protesting, or how long this is going to go on. It's like, well, how long is racism going to go on? How long does this have to be a conversation before someone says, you know what, this happened, slavery happened, and the way that we've been dealing with it as a society is hurting the African American community. And we need to, number one, acknowledge that it exists. Number two, stop acting like racism and slavery are the same thing, because they are not. Let me say that again. Racism and slavery are not the same thing. I understand as an African American that I can live in Pennsylvania, and if I go down south, there's not a slave trader that's somebody going to capture me and throw me into slavery. You know what I mean? I understand that that's not how it is anymore. We're not talking about that. We're talking about racism, which is the actual byproduct of our history in the United States. That happens, okay? We need to stop arguing about things like that and Confederate flags and saying, oh, that's a part of history. Well, I tell you what, if there was a group of people that were, let's just say, terrorists against the United States and wanted to come here and to kill Americans to push whatever their agendas or whatever they thought was right, they would be considered terrorists. They would be considered terrorists because they are a threat to the American society and the American people. I'm not really sure why people are holding on to racism. When you look at history, you know that African Americans have been here since the time that colonists settled here. We have been the two most consistent races in America. And all we've done up until this point is one race has tried to keep the other race down, and another one continues to keep trying to fight for equality. If we can all agree to be equal and be treated equal and hold those that do not agree with that agenda, with those laws, accountable, then we wouldn't have these problems. So unfortunately, sitting in the sidelines and saying, hey, well, I didn't have a slave, or hey, I didn't have nothing to do with slavery, or hey, slavery doesn't exist no more, is not an option. That is an excuse. That's an excuse to allow the things that have been happening to continue to happen. And it's not okay. Okay? Policemen are here to protect and protect and serve. And it shouldn't be a situation where a select group of individuals within the community or within your nation, your country, do not feel like if they get stopped by the cops, this is about being protected to serve. They're already being programmed from the time that they're very young, of how to make it out of that situation alive. This is not to say that there's no good cops that are, out there. And I've said this once, I've said it 1,000 times, I've said it to so many people. It's not about them not being good cops. It's about the cops that are not willing to come forward about the cops that are bad, that are the things that they're doing. It's called accountability. And so then racism just does still stay out there. And if there's a part of our community that's having illegal activities and things of that nature, that doesn't mean that all of us are doing it. So therefore, you can't treat Italian Americans like that. You can't treat Chinese Americans like that. But why, when it comes to the African American community, that rational goes out the window, and all of a sudden we're just all bad people. We're all criminals. We must be locked up. We must be controlled. We must be shut down. We must be silenced. When we start talking about our rights, so we start fighting for our rights, so we start, trying to hold people, anyone accountable, it becomes you're just using the race card. It's like, no matter if you get up in the morning, you go to work, you pay your taxes, you may have children, or you may have even served in the army, and that's, giving your life, or putting your life, at least if you live through it, on the line for your country, representing your country. Where does the respect for the African American community come in as far as humans that care about their children? That it's okay for us to say, hey, let's look into our government like, hey, listen, there's people out there that are targeting our children. They're targeting members of our community that are not criminals. We're not talking about criminals. Why can't we stop talking about criminals? We're talking about the lives that are being taken that are innocent lives. And so let me move forward and say this. If there is an element of criminal activity, then it should be dealt with accordingly, no matter who you are, whether you're an African American, a Euro American, or if you're an American that happens to be a cop. And that's all we're saying. And that's not wrong. This should not have to be repeated over and over again to the point where there's protests not only all across 50 states of the United States, but also in other countries. And our government is slow to move on this. Why? Is it because the majority of them are not African American? I mean, that's the only thing I can think of. How do you make something like that make sense? If you're saying that this is against the law, this is wrong for a person to be killed, murdered, unjustly, unfairly, why is it okay if it's a cop? Listen, I'm not trying to be rude or nothing like this, and I don't mean no disrespect to anyone. But I just want to say that me personally, I would not take a job that I know that I'm not fit for. Meaning this, if you know that you went to school and you wasn't a Billy badass, meaning like you wasn't quick to jump, to fight, or, any of those type of things that maybe, psychologically you're not fit for the type of job that a police officer is, because it's very confrontational. Your life is in danger. And just because your life is in danger and then you have to confront people that are breaking the law or let me be specific, may possibly, quote unquote, be breaking the law, that does not mean that you have a license to pull out your gun to maintain your safety at all times. That doesn't mean that your life means more than the perp. Your job is to get them, detain them, arrest them, and they are to have due process in a courtroom. That's your initiative. So with that in mind, I also want to be clear. I don't want police officers wounded. I don't want good cops out there risking their lives unnecessarily. I also don't want Americans that are, even if they are committing a crime, if our laws say that you are to go to jail for that law, then there's no reason why you're losing your life. If you're 20 years old, it's a possibility you could get out of jail and live a great life and be a great, part of your community and actually, give something back. I've seen it happen. So if as a society we're saying we don't want to give up on you, and if you commit a crime, we're not going to kill you. This is what our society and our laws are saying. We're not going to just kill you. We're going to punish you. You're going to go to jail, or So if we're talking about criminals, then that's the criminal process. To be arrested, proven guilty through due process of the law. And then if they are found guilty, then they are to be jailed. I would say that we're skipping some key parts here when we're finding people, number one, that are not criminals. So this don't even apply to them. How do you even make that make sense? It's racism. That's how you make that make sense. The fact that we live in 2020 and there is still through 4 states, you can say arguably 5 if you want to include Indiana, because theirs are so broad, it's kind of like, I don't want to say what's the point, but I mean, what's the point? If it's not meant to save a life or lock up a criminal that will potentially be using race, color, creed, nationality, your sex, your sexual orientation against you, and that's the reason why they want to attack you, kill you, or you will never see the inside of a courtroom because you're losing your life on the side of a road. So I think that the language of racism is a really important paper. It's a really big discussion. The Black community needs to have, not only with itself but also with others. I was finding that I was having a lot of conversations, especially with white people, about their family members and friends, and talking about these hard conversations that we now have to have because of the things that have been going on in society. And people have had enough. We want change. We want to see better. We know that we can do better. I mean, me personally, I don't even understand how people can, live a life of hate. My family is like a rainbow at this point, and I'm happy for that. And I love them all. So, I mean, some of us are moving forward, with the times and understanding that, color is not the thing that's going to make or break who a person is or is not. And I understand that as a fact. And if you feel like if a person looks like you, that makes them your friend, that makes them your family member, or if a person looks like you, then that makes them a good person, then you're sadly mistaken. And you're not living in the world of reality. You're living in a world with prejudice, racial profiling, and racism. Let's be clear about that. Because nothing about their content or character is written on their skin. And even if it was and they wrote it there, would you really want to have a conversation with them about that? Why did you feel the need to write that on you? I'm just saying, let's just make things make sense. Because that don't make sense, right? So, the race card, it's not a long article. It actually runs, about 2 minutes long. So anything that I put out on my platform for Streettea, if you visit my blog, it'll always list the amount of time that you have to read the article. I always want to be mindful of my reader and your time, so that what, if you are going to engage in the article, what time is going to be required for you as the reader. I think that that's important. A lot of people are asking, why are we addressing the race card in the 20th century? And it is because fundamentally we addressed racism, but then we didn't put any checks and balances in to show that the master slave mentality does not exist and infringe upon our laws or the justice in our nation. All right? When you look at the laws that are built to govern over racial equality, you discover a very, very big loophole. And I'm not talking about just getting a job. I'm talking about buying a house, getting a car, what schools your kids go to. Things like that, the things that are really important, especially if you're a mom and a dad, you're married, you have these kids, you're trying to do the right thing, you're trying to move forward. Black families, I care about you. And I'm saying that the reason why we're talking about this in the 20th century is because there's a loophole, and it's called racism, and we need to address that. We need to address that as a country. We can't keep walking around. It's like the elephant in the room that's keeping us all from moving forward together. So it's not about race. It's not about slavery. So much as it's about the racism came from the slavery. And because you're not even willing to talk about the slavery, we can't even have a good conversation about how we're going to get past it and how we're going to do the right thing by one another. Okay? That's the reason why this is called the language of racism, because this is an attempt to try to rectify that, to bring our history, move it forward, show it through the lens of the 20th century, our every day-to-day interactions, our conversations, things that we're talking about, things that we're going through, things that are affecting us, things that we're seeing on the news every day. When you go back in history and you take a look at that, a lot of things that are going on and being talked about will make a lot more sense. So welcome to Streettea. I thank you for your time. Check out check out the blog, like, follow, share. I invite you guys to, definitely spread that knowledge. It's a lot of history involved. You're welcome to, like I said, you're welcome to share. You're welcome to reach out for commentary or any, conversation, the questions, anything like that. My contact information is located on my blog, as well as we even have a group chat. So, if you really want to get into, real commentary with us, come on Facebook, type in Streettea Family and come on and join us, So till next time, this was the video blog for the race card. I'm going to keep getting y'all some video content, because I know, this is a lot easier on the go, to, keep up with us, everything that's going on and what we got coming out and what to look forward to. So I want to keep y'all, in tune with all of that. So, stay tuned. The next part 3 will be Voices of Dissent, and I'm sure that you guys will find that very interesting. But like I said, welcome to Streettea. Make sure you like, make sure you follow, make sure you share. I thank y'all for your time, and be blessed and be the blessing. All right.